If you haven't started your day with a six-limb toddler clamped to your boot, purring like a generator, you haven't opened a salvage yard on Kettle 3. The little creature weighed 5 kilos, had acid-proof baby teeth, and decided my ankle was its destiny before I'd found coffee. I shook. It purred harder. The yard smelled of hot metal, old ozone, and yesterday's solvent coffee, my preferred perfume. I'm Mara Ortiz, owner of Rust Bucket Row. Morning wind pushed grit across the plates, ticking like rain on a tin roof. I was inventorying hull tiles when the sky stitched a glowing scar over the ridge and dropped a ship into my yard. It plowed a trench, nudged an old ferry, and quit, steaming. The hatch irised and a silhouette filled it, 2 meters of scarred plates, 4 arms cradling a wriggling bundle that yipped like squeaky hydraulics. Ozone rolled out. The figure stepped down, bled onto my deck plates, and spoke through a translator. Human Mara. Trust urgent. The bundle unfolded into 4 cubs, night black fur, too many elbows. One sneezed sparks. Another had butted my knee. The boot hugger renewed its vows and gnawed with purpose. The hunter straightened. Sigils across its thorax matched Vraka clan marks from a bulletin I'd half read. Migratory apex hunters, honorable like knives. It tapped the medallion. Pursuit follows. Cubs cannot be with blade. You carrot. Click. Caretake. Return by dusk. You crash into my shop and want a babysitter? I said. Guard. Teach. Prevent death. It corrected. Thin contrails braided the sky. The hunter nuzzled each cub, pressed a metal cylinder into my palm. Milk analog. Keep from wires. They seek silicon. Deny wires. My yard is 90% wires, I said. Deny. It repeated, and tossed me a credit slab with enough zeros to make me religious. The ship lurched skyward, trailing smoke, and arrowed along the ridge. The yard went quiet except for purring. Okay, I told the cubs. Rules. They scattered. One scaled a loader with magnetized palms. One slew a coil of fiber optic. One launched from my chest. Park ranger reflexes caught it shy of my windpipe. The boot hugger kept chewing my ankle with devotion. In the office I appended the cylinder into a bowl. The liquid beaded silver blue, then settled. 4 snouts pressed to it, tongues clicking like tiny pistons. Purring filled the room. I locked the bay doors, killed the security beacon, and skimmed the colony charter. Section 18. Harboring category red fauna inside municipal bounds equals fine plus forfeiture. No thanks. I was now an illegal daycare. If the guild caught me, I'd lose the yard, my license, and likely my favorite boots. A perimeter ping jolted the terminal. Drone feed, 3 figures in matte armor easing between stacks of solar winglets, rifles low, helmets stamped with the stepped pyramid of the Relictum Guild. Trophy tour operators, not law. I looked at the cubs. Quiet game, I whispered. 3 froze, ears swiveling. Bootbiter bit the rim of the bull and tried to look innocent. Don't imprint, I thought. Vraka imprinting bound keepers into obligations even cross-species law respected. I slung my old field kit and gestured. Follow. They flowed after me, 3 shadows and a clumsy comet, into aisles of shuttle doors and Euro towers. The guild leader, a woman with a comet scar, crouched and touched a fresh claw mark. She gestured, visors flicked to thermal. I told my yard scatterers to misbehave. Heat sinks spooled up until the aisles became a stuttering sauna. Heat made the air wiggle. The cubs looked like mirages learning to walk. I pressed a finger to my mouth. A cub pressed a paw to its own. The hunters spread. Parent peeled off, the leader said over comms. Cubs are here. Payment doubles if delivered unspoiled. Not today. Unspoiled, I muttered, and felt an old, flat anger switch on. I edged the cubs toward Bay 3, home of the magnet crane and a temperamental ore smelter. Salvage yards are choirs. If you know the song, you can make them sing. In the control booth I set Bootbiter down. It gnawed the console leg. Not a wire, I told it, and palmed the main breaker. The smelter woke like a dragon. Fans roared, heat bled, the old ferry hull on the crane lifted and groaned. I ran the scatter pattern. Heat blossomed down the aisles, popping paint and confusing thermals. Thermal event, the leader snapped. She's cycling junk. I toggled the yard speakers and let the 10-second loop I used on zealots breathe across the bay, something huge inhaling in the dark. The cub's hackles rose, then smoothed as I held out my palm. The leader stepped into the doorway, rifle angled. We're tracking dangerous fauna, she called. Me too, I said, and hit the big red button. The magnet dropped the ferry hull with a clang. The smelter gulped loose aluminum and choked. The floor shivered. I killed the lights. Darkness plus heat turned the bay into a fumbling metal jungle. The guild team staggered. Bolts rattled through vents like hail. Yards have rhythms. I walked the cubs through that rhythm. Step, pause, slide. Bootbiter tried to bite the storm. I tucked it against my ribs. Imprinting risk pinged, scent, heartbeat, tone, so I dropped my voice to neutral. Relocate for safety. Cooperate. Obedient chirp. We slid into the service crawl beneath the booth, a warm tunnel smelling of oil. My wrist buzzed. Traffic control announcing a sector closure due to aerial pursuit. Dusk receded to a rumor. We spilled from the crawl into a canyon of cargo crates. Through a gap I saw the sky scribbled with contrails. The hunter hadn't shaken all of them. One cub tipped its head and trilled, the others answered, teeth buzzing harmony. A translator once rendered it, family signal, location/comfort/request. They were broadcasting coordinates to anything that knew the code. I cupped a muzzle. Shh. No beacon. Upset blink. I raided a crate of acoustic putty, tore strips with my teeth. Game time. Be the quietest cloud. They tolerated the patches. The purring dropped to a soft tremor. Outside, the guild regrouped. We wait the thermal out, the leader said. Parent returns, we take 2, let it keep 2. Split the family for bait. Something locked into place. I bend rules when they're written by people who never crawl under machines. And I am stubborn about not losing what's entrusted to me. I scratched Bootbiter's chin. Okay, Clouds. New plan. If dusk meant a war zone and both law and guild would turn my yard into a trap, the safest spot until the parent returned was the most unfriendly. The decommissioned relay tower on Ridge 8, where wind screamed, ladders rattled, and maintenance spots not anything that moved. Nobody lingered there. Perfect. We ghosted along the crates and slipped through a fence seam. The ground tilted toward the ridge, a spine of basalt and shrubs. I toggled the yard to close for inspection, launched a decoy drone projecting my heat, and hoped the guild liked chasing shopkeepers. A dull boom rolled from the horizon. The cubs pressed closer, hearts ticking fast. We reached the relay tower, skeletal platforms stacked into the sky. Its access door hung crooked. Inside, the wind became a language. The bots muttered in the walls. The cubs' ears flattened, then perked as they realized the bots did not taste like milk. I patched a blanket from thermal tarps, wedged us behind a dead console, and listened. The guild's footsteps stayed far and confused. The sky filled with the long thunder of ships arguing. I dribbled the last of the milk analog and watched 4 small faces tilt in unison. We wait, I told them. We keep quiet. We don't chew the relay. Bootbiter eyed a dangling cable with longing. I tapped the patch on its muzzle. It sighed and put its head on my boot like a penitent saint. Better, I said, as the tower shuddered with another boom. Hold together. They arranged themselves with surprising geometry, me at the center, eyes glinting like NAV lights. I thought about fines I couldn't pay, guild contracts I wouldn't honor, and a hunter with too many enemies. Mostly I thought about 4 small engines idling against my ankles, and how trust, unasked, unearned, had been dropped into my hands along with too many credits. Outside, a layered howl rolled across the ridge, a sound that made the bolts sing. The cub's head snapped toward the door. Even through the putty, their answering chord vibrated the floor. Family. I put my palm on the door and knew 2 things at once. The hunter was fighting toward us, and so were the people who wanted its story turned into a souvenir. Stakes clarified. My yard, my freedom for lives, and a promise with more zeros than cents, all balanced on whether I could keep teeth and greed from meeting before the light changed. Quiet clouds, I said, gathering them close as the wind sharpened. Stay with me. We make it to dusk together. If you think babysitting stops at snacks and lullabies, try barricading a relay tower while 4 alien toddlers harmonized through your ribs and paid trophy hunters nose the wind for your name. The lattice hummed. The wind combed it into a note that made the cub's whiskers quiver and shredded footsteps into lint. What didn't help was the clock, 2 mouthfuls of milk analog and 4 mouths. I cracked the relay's access panel. Inside was a museum of tired ideas, ceramic fuses, cracked heat sinks. A nest of fiber mice had turned into art. Maintenance bots muttered in obsolete dialects and tried to bite fingers. The cubs watched with solemn hunger. Bootbiter, my boot's sworn spouse, reached for a dangling line with holy purpose. I fed it a strip of leather and got a grateful, rumbling sneeze. Lesson 1. I whispered. If it looks like a wire, it is not food. The others pawed the thermal tarp into a den and stacked themselves into a knot. My decoy drone died under somebody's heel. Public band chatter scratched my wrist. Negative on shopkeeper heat. Yard is cold. Ridge 8 relay shows thermal variance. Relictum Guild, professional and curious. Their leader wore a comet of scar and price dents like sermons. A warm tower would pull her like gravity. I needed the tower to lie. Vraka family signals are layered harmonics glossed with heat and scent. I had sound and heat. Scent I could fake by denying everything else, flood the air with solvent and dust until noses quit. I bridged a split bus, bled my emergency cell into the backbone, coaxed the mass lights into a sleepy blink. I sampled the cub's chord with my wrist mic, shifted it 2 octaves, braided it into the tower's moan, and bled heat from the north girders. It smelled like hot hope. Wind did the rest. The bots hated improvisation. I bribed them with a pouch of hex screws. While they argued, I called Ms. Rhea at the noodle stand, also the night shift traffic controller. Ortiz, she said, voice wrapped in steam. Your yard is closed and 3 people in antique armor are arguing with your loader. I'm charging them table fees. At a smug tax, I said. Also, climb vectors on anything heavy near Ridge 8, and if a sealed container of denatured protein fell off a truck, I'd be grateful. You want soup in a wind zone, she said. I want to obey conservation law, I said. Watch your head, she said. I killed the lights and climbed to the second platform. Footsteps braided with wind on the lee ladder, careful, competent. The scarred woman rose into view, visor filmed with grit, rifle slung. We met like co-workers at a bad coffee maker in a worse office. Permit to be on municipal structure? She asked. Permit to chase endangered fauna into one? I said. She glanced toward the terraformer trench. Everything valuable is endangered, she said. Cubs? Collateral. Or leverage. Wind likes to be in tune, I told her when she cocked her head. And I can't stop fixing broken things within arm's reach. She listened. The wind carried my falsified family cord sideways, heat bleeding into the trench. Her frown passed for professional admiration. We're being played, she told her calm and me. By wind or you. Wind has better cheekbones, I said. Her earpiece hissed. Heat trace crossing East Bend. Moving fast. Try not to get eaten, she said and vanished. The sky ripped open. 2 ships carved the clouds, one limping, both mean. The Vraka hunter flew like math, solve for fuel, solve for angle, pray the answer isn't you. The cubs pressed to the door, their cords swelling until the putty warmed on their muzzles. I peeled it back. 4 small voices tried to drag a parent home by sound alone. I tuned the speakers higher, bled more heat, and clicked the ancient aircraft beacon to a steady red. I wanted the parent to read the trench as path, not trap. The guild wanted panic. The wind wanted nothing and helped everyone. Something bumped the latch. Different rhythm from the scarred woman, younger. I opened before the knock became courage. A boy, 19 maybe, stood in the hatch with a rifle he didn't trust. He'd bought a panel from me 2 months ago. "Ma'am," he said, because manners outlive wisdom, "we need to evacuate this structure." "You should start with yourself," I said. "An angry parent is inbound, and orders don't cover funerals." He looked east, then at me. I tilted my head. He went. If that bought him a morning where he didn't shoot anything honest, I'd keep it like jewelry. The hunter fell out of cloud like a thrown tool, caught a hard edge of air, and flared over the trench. The fake chorus pulled, and it followed, wary and low. The lead relictum ship nicked a rising thermal and overcorrected. The second got greedy and rode its partner's wake too tight. That bought 1 heartbeat. "Fine," I told the tower. "We go loud." I spiked the siren's capacitors into the old rail. Dust jumped to plasma. For a brief minute the trench lit like an artery, a river of light shouting this way. The parent heard. It dove along the hot rails, skidding the air. The cub screamed a chord so pure it chipped my teeth. The lead guild ship hesitated. The second clipped dirt and skated, alive but reconsidering careers. At the far bend something fell from the parent, a braided cord with rings. It snagged and chimed. Message or accident, I couldn't tell. The cubs knew. They surged for the door. I caught 2 by their tails and a third by the scruff. The fourth, boot biter, naturally, slalomed between my boots like a roomer and shot into brush. I pivoted. The doorframe behind my head kicked chips into my hair as someone finally stopped pretending to be patient. I dove after the comet. We dropped into a drainage cut of thorns and dust. Bullets chewed rock where my skull had been. Boot biter hit my ribs like a furnace and went very still, which is how babies process physics. I wrapped it tight and did the math. We couldn't stay or run far. We needed a door that didn't exist. A shadow knelt at the rim. Not the boy. The scarred woman. She read the scene like a gauge, human, cub, trajectory. Her rifle tipped, then angled away. "You're quick for someone who complains about her knees," she said. "I only complain on ladders," I said. "Consider letting me keep what imprinted on my bad decisions." "You're pushing us toward the trench," she said. "Smart. Dangerous. If the parent tracks that and we're in the way, it won't differentiate." "Then don't be in the way," I said. "East looks like wisdom tonight." "My contract dislikes losing," she said, tapping her earpiece. "Pull off the tower. Sweep north. Leave the trench to the wind." "That isn't losing," I said. "It's choosing a different invoice," she said. "Also, I don't shoot nursery staff. Even illegal ones." Her gaze flicked to the small face under my chin. "They're halfway to calling you keeper." "I'm trying not to be anybody's keeper," I said. "Try harder," she said and vanished. I didn't trust the gift, but I accepted the seconds. Bootbiter blinked, licked my chin, and made a tiny, embarrassed chirp. "Temporary," I told it. "I'm a bridge, not a house." We crabbed along the cut, slid through a lower grate, tumbled into the tower's belly. The other 3 poured over me, checking their sibling with frantic paws. Their cords steadied. I topped a bowl with the last breath of milk analog, cut it with broth from a thermal can I never thought I needed, and watched 4 faces tilt like flowers toward a sun. Outside, the trench's light died back to memory stain. The sky noise circled, not gone. The parent hadn't found us. Good. It hadn't been trapped. Better. It was bleeding. Worst. My wrist buzzed. Ms. Ree's voice rolled through the grate. "Wind dropped a crate at the ridge marker with someone's name on it," she said. "Label says pet food. If asked, you never met me?" "You're a saint," I said. "Saints charge interest," she said. "Bring back my thermos." I killed the line. The cub's pupils widened, their ears tuned to something I couldn't hear. Through the door crack, the wind changed key to metal and blood. Dusk wasn't a color yet, but it was a direction, and the parent had picked a vector that intersected ours whether I liked it or not. Okay, I said. New rules. Your parent sees no gunfire. We look bigger than we are. No chewing wires without permission. Bootbiter put a paw on my boot like a vow. I started turning maintenance bots into lanterns and the tower's tired bones into a picture that looked, from the right angle, like 4 bright hearts standing guard over a door the wind itself would hesitate to cross. You can tell the moment trouble stops circling and decides to land. Every animal in range knows before you do. The cubs went rigid, pupils dilated to coins. The wind, which had been gossiping with the tower all day, dropped into a crouch. I was halfway through strapping a flood lamp to a maintenance spot when the first shadow passed over us, huge and deliberate, blotting the last smear of sunlight. The Vraka hunter had found us. It wasn't graceful anymore. One wing assembly smoked like a funeral pyre, hull scarred from rail shots and atmospheric burns. Even from a distance, I could see rents in its armor that had been stitched shut mid-flight. The ship staggered into a hover, every vector thruster coughing, then set down hard enough to rattle dust from the rafters. The Cubs' family cord swelled, a tidal pull, and I could feel the hum through my molars. That's when the second shadow cut across the first. The Relictum Guild's lead vessel slid into view, gunwales open, running lights cold. The scarred woman wasn't bluffing, she'd pulled her team north, but someone higher up had sent reinforcements. Sleeker ships, clean paint, the kind flown by people who got bonuses for bringing something back alive. A third flare bloomed farther west, mercs, maybe, opportunists chasing a beacon they didn't understand. In minutes the airspace around Ridge 8 would look like a bar fight where the bar was on fire. I crouched at the tower door, one palm on the latch, one arm cradling Bootbiter. The other 3 pressed against my legs, claws pricking through my pants, trembling with the instinct to run toward the parent and away from the guns. We're going to do this like a salvage job, I told them softly. Step by step, keep your limbs, keep your head. The parent disembarked, armor plates hissing as they cooled. 2 of its arms still carried weapons, the other 2 hanging stiff, maybe broken. Its mandibles worked, a click pattern I'd heard once in a Vraka market. Family present? Danger close? I stepped out into the open. All 4. I called, lifting my chin toward the tower. But you've got company, and they don't care about your reunion being sentimental. It saw the guild vessel pivot, bringing weapons to bear, and let out a chord so low it vibrated the dust under my boots. The Cubs answered, and that was it, the air filled with the kind of sound that didn't just announce a fight, it announced ownership. Vraka don't ask for their young back. They claim them. The guild ship fired first, not to kill but to corral, plasma bursts bracketing the parent's path, herding it away from the tower. Clever. Keep the adult moving, separate it from the cubs, snatch the small ones in the confusion. Not happening, I muttered, and kicked the first maintenance bot into life. The flood lamp on its back blazed, and the old servo screamed as it rolled into the open, weaving erratically. The guild gunners hesitated, misreading the flare as a heavy weapon spinning up. That bought us seconds, nothing more. The parent tried to break left. A second guild ship screamed down the ridge, cutting off the escape. Above them, the merc flare drew closer, its pilot clearly hoping to swoop in once everyone else was bleeding. I needed chaos, and I had it in the form of 60 meters of barely functional relay tower. I dashed back inside, set every remaining maintenance bot to maximum output, and overrode their safeties. Lights blazed across the tower's skeleton, strobing against the darkening sky. Old broadcast dishes groaned as I forced them to rotate, scattering our falsified family cord in every direction. To anyone listening on Vraka frequencies, it would sound like cubs calling from half a dozen places at once. The effect was immediate. The guild's fire pattern wavered. The second ship broke formation, chasing one of the phantom signals toward the far ridge. The merc flare dipped lower, confused about where the real prize was. Even the parent paused, scanning the canyon with mandibles twitching. Over here! I shouted, waving the cubs forward. The parent caught sight of them and surged toward the tower. The guild lead ship reacted instantly, swinging its nose toward us, clearly calculating that grabbing the cubs was faster than chasing the adult. That's when the scarred woman's voice cut in over open comms. Relictum lead, you're about to make a bad investment. I didn't see where she was, but I felt the tremor when something heavy slammed into the guild ship's starboard engine. Fire blossomed. The vessel slewed sideways, scraping the ridge before clawing for altitude. The parent reached the tower, dropping to one knee so the cubs could scramble up its arms. Bootbiter twisted in my grip, then launched into its siblings' pile, vanishing in a tangle of fur and armor. The family cord they made together was almost physical. It pushed against my chest like wind. Go, I told the hunter. You've got a hole, use it before they close it again. It hesitated, mandibles working, then reached into a belt pouch and pressed something into my palm, a flat, silver disc etched with Vraka sigils. The weight of it was more than metal. It was promise, maybe debt. The moment cracked as the Merc flare finally committed, diving straight toward us. The parent roared, not sound but vibration, the kind you feel in your bones and teeth, and leapt. Jets flared, wings flexed, and the cubs clung tight as the hunter rocketed down the trench. The Merc didn't care about me. I was just debris between them and their payday. I bolted for the tower's ladder, climbing hard as the ship's thrusters scorched the ground where I'd been. My shoulder screamed with every pull, but adrenaline and stubbornness kept me moving. From the top platform I saw it all, the parent threading the trench at impossible speed, the guild ships regrouping, the scarred woman's vessel slipping into their blind spot, and the Merc overshooting in a plume of dust. The hunter's trail lit briefly as it engaged some kind of afterburn, vanishing into the dark beyond the ridge. One guild ship broke off to follow, the other stayed behind, scanning, maybe realizing too late that I'd been part of the problem all along. I ducked into the tower's comm shack and killed the fake signals. Silence crashed down, broken only by the wind finding its old voice again. I didn't relax, not with angry professionals still in the neighborhood, but the worst of the storm had passed over. When I climbed back down, the scarred woman was leaning against the hatch, helmet off, hair plastered with sweat and dust. Didn't think you'd live through that, she said. Didn't plan on it, I admitted. But it's bad manners to hand over someone's kids. Her mouth twitched, almost a smile. You just made yourself memorable in places you might not want to be remembered. Story of my life, I said. Overhead, the sky was finally dark. Dusk had come and gone in the chaos, and the ridge was quiet, too quiet, which meant the end of this mess wasn't here yet. Somewhere out there, the Vraka hunter was running for safe ground, and somewhere else, people with guns were deciding whether I was worth circling back for. I still had the silver disc in my palm. It was warm. Heavy. I slipped it into my pocket and told myself it didn't mean anything. But deep down, I knew better. Because when a Vraka leaves you a piece of itself, it's not just gratitude, it's a thread. And threads, once tied, have a way of pulling you into knots you never meant to be part of. And I had this sinking feeling that mine had just begun to tighten. Some debts are quiet. They sit in your pocket and wait. The silver disc wasn't quiet. Every time I shifted, it seemed to find bone, reminding me that somewhere out there, a Vraka hunter and its cubs were moving through the dark with my scent still in their fur. The guild didn't linger on Ridge 8, they'd bled too much for too little, but Mercs are scavengers. 2 of their ships were still out there, running search grids, hoping the hunter doubled back. I'd barricaded the relay tower, killed the last of the lights, and was debating whether to slip back to my yard when the wind changed again. This time it carried something more than grit, smoke, metal, and the faint pulse of that family cord. It was close. Too close. I climbed to the platform, scanning the ridgeline with my old binoculars. The parent's silhouette flickered into view between outcroppings, moving slower than before, the cubs clinging low along its torso. One arm hung limp, armor dented in ways that said something had tried very hard to make a meal of them. And right behind, cutting the air like a knife, came a Merc gunship. They'd found the trail. I didn't have time to think about risk or rules. Both had been irrelevant since the moment that ship crashed into my yard. I triggered the tower's emergency beacon, not the fake family signal, but the real one, the one I'd sworn I'd never use because it could fry half the circuits on the ridge. The beacon flared white-hot, a spear of light stabbing up through the night, and the tower's skeleton screamed as if it was being torn apart. The effect on the Merc was instant. Its pilot flinched from the flash, yawed wide, then overcorrected. In that heartbeat, the parent swung toward the tower, engines whining in protest, and dropped into the narrow cut of ground just below me. "Inside!" I yelled, waving toward the service crawl. The hunter hesitated. Vraka aren't built for tight spaces, but it shoved the cubs ahead, all four tumbling into the tunnel. Bootbiter was last, looking back at the parent with something I recognized as pure, unfiltered trust. The kind that puts its weight on you whether you're ready or not. The Merc recovered fast, arcing back for another pass. I grabbed the old smelter control from my kit, nothing more than a jury-rigged capacitor bank now, and wired it into the beacon's line. The next time the Merc's nose crossed our arc, I dumped the entire charge into its forward sensors. The burst wasn't enough to kill, but it was enough to blind. The ship screamed past us, overcorrected again, and clipped the basalt ridge in a spray of fire. The parent didn't waste the opening. It scooped the cubs back into its arms, paused only long enough to press its forehead to mine, a brief, alien gesture that carried more weight than words, and then it was airborne, engines coughing, vanishing into the night with its family tight against its chest. I stayed in the tower's shadow until the sky was empty. Only then did I climb back up to kill the beacon for good, the smell of scorched wiring thick in the air. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the knowledge that I'd just burned every bridge with people who don't forget faces. By the time I made it back to Rust Bucket Row, the yard looked almost normal. Loader parked, doors closed, a scattering of windblown grit hiding the worst of the day's footprints. The only proof any of it had happened was the silver disc still in my pocket. It was warm again. I turned it over in my hand, tracing the sigils. Part of me wanted to toss it into the deepest bin in the yard, bury it under rust and forget. But debts like that aren't scrap, they're anchors. Somewhere, a Vraka hunter owed me a favor, and favors in that currency are dangerous things. When dawn came, I brewed coffee, sat on the edge of the loader ramp, and watched the sun burn the last of the night from the ridge. No ships. No hunters. No Mercs. Just the hum of the yard waking up. And then, faint but clear, the wind brought me a sound, four small voices, harmonizing in the distance. I smiled despite myself. "Yeah," I said into the empty yard. "You're welcome." Because in the end, it wasn't about credits, or law, or the trouble I just invited into my life. It was about four small engines of fur and claws that had been mine to protect for a handful of hours, and knowing that, for once, I hadn't dropped what was placed in my hands. Even if it meant the universe now had my name written in someone else's story.